Hi my friends, this is Wayne Yap and I'm a drumsticks coach. I help people drumsticks in life and in their poker games for them to take things to the next level. And I just actually busted from the PSPC 25K as of this filming time. And so I actually spent a bit of time thinking about how to play in tournaments. So today, I'm going to share with you the 3 most important factors for you to consider about your opponents when you are playing in a tournament. Or this might even work for cash games, but it's especially so for tournaments because people value tournaments a lot more differently than in cash games. So it's a lot more for you to act on, for you to exploit these players. So number 1, the most important thing I think to consider about players is the bad players. When you are sitting at a poker table, really sit down and understand who are the weaker players at the table, who actually makes mistakes. And then it's not just about who makes mistakes, it's about how they make mistakes. Like when I was sitting down at the table yesterday, there was a guy on my right who was just leading the flop a lot. And when they take certain unorthodox approach like leading on the flop a lot, usually bad players have some kind of tendency. They either lead merged, or they lead the middle part of their range, or they lead really strong. It's not so often they lead weak, but of course it is also the case. So when I see an action like this, I really need to sit down and consider how this bad player actually leads. And I mean, there are many other spots where you can actually dive deeper and to think about the psyche behind a bad player. How do they play? How do they act in a certain spot? And then it is your job to extrapolate that into other situations, because how they think about why they do a certain thing in a certain spot would likely have a high correlation with how they play another spot. So once you understand how this person thinks, it's a lot easier for you to exploit them. And exploit them doesn't always mean attacking them. Sometimes if they're a bad player and they fold too much and they're too tight, exploiting them would be folding versus them. So point number 2 is to really consider who are you stealing from, or who is stealing from you. And the reason I think who you are stealing from is more important is because people always think about what kind of raise size to use. They think about how wide they should steal, and I don't think enough is talked about thinking who are actually behind you, who is going to attack you. Let's say you're raising from the cutoff. I want you to seriously think about how wide is the button 3-betting, how wide is the button calling, how wide is the small blind 3-betting or calling, and then most importantly, how does the big blind play in his big blind spot? This is a spot where people play drastically different. There are some people like me that just don't fold the big blind, especially when stack sizes are short, because from a mathematical standpoint, you basically don't fold anything on the big blind when you are like 8 BBs or 10 BBs, and even if it's a 2.3x. And there are people on the other end of the spectrum. They just keep folding to min raises. And sometimes, if the small blind and big blind are extremely tight and the loose players are to your left and you are under the gun, it's a lot harder for these loose players to attack you because there are so many players left to act, and you can go for a wide steal from a long range steal from early position. So if you actually think about who is in the big blind, how wide you can steal from them, it's a lot easier for you to implement a better strategy. It might not be a better strategy in a vacuum, but exploitatively this will always be the best play. And tournament, like if you can exploit people well, your win rate and your edge is going to be so much higher. Next is to think about if the big blind, his defense frequencies are really high. Someone like me, how do you minimize your how do you construct your strategy such that you can play well against him? If somebody is folding a lot on the big blind, you can min raise and you can just steal really wide. I mean, when you min raise, you can steal a lot wider than when you're raising 2.5 or 3x. But if this big blind player is pretty loose and he likes to defend a lot and defend correctly, you don't want to give him the opportunity to defend that much. So maybe you increase your sizing here. Maybe you go for a 2.5x or 2.7x. I mean, when stack sizes are a little bit more shallow, like 40 or 50 BBs are average, then maybe you can't really implement so big. Then maybe you go like 2.3 or 2.4x. But the idea here is to really consider who you are stealing from, because that's how you maximize your win rate. And point number 3 is how badly ... And this ... can mean quite a lot of things. So basically, how badly do these players want to win this tournament? Some players really want to win and they go all out. They're fighters, they make big bluffs, they play really bold, they try and build a stack. And if you can categorize these people well and you know that they want to win the tournament badly and they don't mind losing, they're thinking about how they can win, then you can adjust your strategy against them appropriately. And most importantly is the other end of the spectrum, where people, they don't want to bust. They play as though they really don't want to bust. When you actually get to play against these players, it is really fun because you can keep bluffing them. And you know, they don't want to bust, so when they have hit a hand on the flop or the turn, especially if it's draw heavy board, they play really aggressively with their hands. And if you're playing against a player such as this, it really makes sense for you to go out of your way to exploit them. When they don't raise the flop, their turn and river, they're gonna be weak, and you can over bluff against them. You can overbet, and you can play really aggressively against them. Yeah, and I mean, the other factor to consider is that, for example, right now, if yesterday I was playing the 25k. 25k is kind of like it's not a super high stakes, but it is pretty big for most people that are playing this. Although a lot of these people have won a tournament, so they have had some money come from the tournament and they have some of sort of a bankroll, but for many players 25k is much bigger than they're used to playing. And when I actually go down and sit down in 25k, I'm really thinking about who can actually afford to play this 25k tournament, who actually is bankrupt, who is like somebody that is selling a lot of pieces and they have very little piece in themselves. They have like 10 or 20%, or they are just basically betting, and it's like when they win the package, they're just kind of hoping to bink it. And when you actually, I mean, of course it's very hard to actually be accurately predict how important this is to them not to lose, but if you have some sort of estimation and some sort of understanding, it truly helps you to play against them better. So yeah, next time you play a tournament, please take these 3 pieces of information and think about these things, and I can promise you that it will increase your win rate. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comment section whether you agree with this, whether you don't agree with this, what kind of videos you like to see, because I am here to serve you, and you giving me feedback about what I should talk about really helps me to take you to the next level. So until next time, please go out there and conquer your poker dreams.